Hello, everyone. I hope you had fantastic 2 days here at AutoSense InCabin. I don't know for you, for me, AutoSense is really the perfect place for having a look at the potential of technologies, and it gives a sense of how much we can do and how much we can achieve by using all these technologies, and especially with a couple of fantastic goals, among which one is the autonomous cars. And I'd like to invite you for the next 30 minutes to think about what's the value of this from the perspective of the end customers. And let's be even more accurate from the perspective of the driver. And the driver being, in most cases, for this autonomous driving, the one that is buying the car. So what's the value for the end customer? And that's what we're going to define based on what the goal, what these technologies have to achieve eventually. First thing, at Valeo, we've been always thinking that the driving automation, the liberation of the customer is what we have to achieve. And this, we put it in a concept which we call the driver liberation. So autonomous driving for us should be achieved with the first goal, which is more safety. That's why it's at the center of this picture. But as well, it will serve the final purpose of liberating somehow the driver. So from the perspective of the driver, we are switching from a world where there is assisted driving with a locked attention, and attention will be the key metric we are going to discuss here, towards a restored attention, which is automated driving. And Valeo is providing all kinds of technologies along with all the partners we see today in order to achieve this final goal. So we are the forefront of this safe and autonomous revolution. But at the same time, if we look at where we are today and what these customers, what the value we provide today with respect to this final goal, let's look at where we stand. So we need to think we are still far from achieving this full delegation. We are still very much in a phase where the attention is needed. We are in the supervised driving. And so we have represented here where we think we are, and there will be still quite some time before we achieve the full autonomy. And so what is good, on the one hand, is that we have statistical evidence to show that all these technologies are serving the safety. And we can certainly say that it is serving the purpose of the safety on the one hand. On the other hand, we need to get used to the fact that supervision is here to stay for now quite some years. And we're not talking anymore about a few years, but it's rather in decades. So the main part of the automation for vehicles will be this supervised driving for now quite some years, which somehow it's a good news for engineers as well. We will still be working for quite some time on improving these systems step by step. But what about the end customer, which is us also? Is it a disappointed customer? Is it a customer for some who are thinking that it's good to take more time to be safer and achieve this goal in full safety? There are all kinds of positions for these customers to whom we have, and that's what we want to state. We have promised this liberation. And we are not there yet, and it will take time to be there. So that's why we call it this primal promise, and the attention will be required for now quite some time. So let's think about what will be the customer experience for these years, during all these years where the driver has still to dedicate attention to the road. And why is it important? It's important because we cannot develop all these technologies just for the sake of the technology. It has to still retain the interest. There needs to be customer value for now more than a decade. So let's focus on one aspect which we think will be key in making these cars still enjoyable for quite some time, and that is attention. All the drivers, all of us have a kind of budget of attention that is limited by our physical state, drowsiness, all kinds of parameters. Still, at the end, there is a certain available budget of attention which is being monopolized somehow by many different aspects in the car. And here we've put the infotainment, we have the phone. Obviously, we say to all these drivers, you have to still keep attention on the roads. That's why it's the central one. But we have all kinds of cognitive distractions, as well as DMS, which is monitoring what's happening. And this driver buying the car, possibly buying the option to get level 2 autonomous driving, for example, is going to, at some point, be convinced that there is value for money behind. And that's when the car is driving level 2 plus, still the liberation is happening somehow. So what we put here is that all these technologies are creating an attention strain. And so we cannot say the driver is in the car, but completely driven by the car and having this attention relieved and able to do anything. And we are developing all kinds of technologies for that. We have technologies that are restoring attention, which are the one providing autonomy to the car. So the more the car is able to drive by itself, the more you can relieve your attention from the road. That's the obvious part, and that's what we have here as driving safety, driving automation. We are also developing technologies that are enforcing attention, and that's about the driver monitoring system, our driver information from the cluster, for example. These measure how much attention you still dedicate on the road and how much the car is safe because you are able to take back the control. And finally, we need to also point out there is a kind of paradox. We are developing plenty of technologies that in car are attracting attention, capturing attention. And at the end, the customers are buying these ones. If you buy a big screen on the car, these are very appealing features which will capture your attention. The connectivity as well, the smartphone as well. So we have all this portfolio of technologies. We are developing most, if not all of them at Valeo. We are dealing with these in AutoSense InCabin, and at the same time, we kind of fail to realize that there is a paradox here. On the one hand, we say you're going to be free. On the other hand, we say your attention is going to be controlled by many kinds of means. And if we do not acknowledge this, the customers for the next 10 years might be very disappointed that they've been promised something that we do not achieve. So the thing is, these customers are buying the car that is available at a point in time. But this car, as we all know, has been developed for the previous 3 years, maybe a little bit less now, before it's available on the market. So the act of buying the car, which is at the center here, it's in fact something that has been prepared for many years by the suppliers, among which Valeo, by the OEMs, but also this cannot be developed and put on the market without countries, the regulatory bodies, and the countries selecting which one will apply, for example. So we need to account for the time that is elapsed between the decisions we make, the technology we develop, maybe for some 5 more years before the car is available on the market. And at the end, who is going to buy the car? It is obviously the driver, and the driver needs to know what kind of features will be available. And we think it's good to consider that there will be different extreme roads to reach this final goal, which is the full autonomy. We wanted to make them very extreme, simplified, so that we think what is good for us to develop all these technologies knowing they will be bought at the end by the customer. So we selected 2 main roads. One is the one focusing on safety. If you make it super safe, what will it mean for the customers buying the car? And the other one, we call it more liberal, maybe more aggressive. And these happen differently depending on countries. So my message is, even very much upstream when developing the technologies, it is good to think how these technologies are going to influence the value for the customer, and whether they are going to facilitate a safety road or a more aggressive road, maybe, and less safe. So let's look at the first one. So we call it the regulatory route. Just in a nutshell, what does it mean? We increase the driver distractions because we bring all these technologies, and the customers have a limited know-how as it is today. ADAS systems are not fully understood, and their limitations even less. We obviously have a risk to increase the amount of accidents, and in some countries, I've put here mostly Europe, but the US is as well going this direction, we have safety and attention control technologies that need to be deployed, like DMS. And this will limit the ADAS usage, and as a consequence of it, obviously, the customer has limited capability to do other things in the car than simply focus on the road. This obviously is creating less interest for the customer, it's less appealing, and as a consequence, it's going to limit our capability to grow our business. This route also means that if you follow and if you are aware of how AEB systems, for example, have been deployed on the road, it's mostly not financed by customers. These are not options that the customers will buy because they are less attractive. They are highly controlled and regulated. And now if we come back to our somehow initial promise, which was the liberation and the safety, this route is focusing on safety. Are we liberating the customers, the drivers? Actually, not much. And the attention strain is very high. In your car, you are split between what you want to do, possibly looking at a screen in the car, your smartphone, what actually the car is enforcing you to do, which is keeping the eyes on the road. And therefore, this is not very enjoyable for the customers at the end. And the financing of this, which means our whole business of developing these technologies and deploying them on the road, is going to be less financed by customers, but mostly absorbed by OEMs, as it has been the case for safety features. Now, if we take the opposite route, and you might recognize here the US or China, this is more driven by technology push and features that are very appealing for customers. So it starts the same way. We increase the driver distractions by providing many options. The customers are still limited in their know-how of the system. We increase the amount of accidents, but if the regulatory pressure is not that high, then the OEMs will continue offer systems that are delivering these driving automation features. What's interesting, I heard several times, people, especially in China, telling me if my car is not safe enough, it's just I should have bought a car with a better ADAS systems. It's not because of the OEM. It's me to put more money on the ADAS features in the car. And this means that in these kind of countries or in this route, in fact, the customer might want to buy more expensive cars, and the OEMs will be financed by their sales because they are providing more appealing features. So at the end of the day, we are developing technologies that will provide a certain level of liberation, which on the other hand is not that safe. And this might end up also providing a lack of trust on the customers if they are more and more aware that these systems are actually not safe. So the attention strain might be still very high. Now, the good part is this is going to probably be financed much better because there is a customer base to buy this, maybe beyond the early adopters and the technology addict people. And so this will be developed probably faster. So the big question we have, and that's a real question about where to put our investment in Valeo, it's should we follow one or these two routes, or how to make sure that we can still be appealing enough to customers while we are a little bit in what's the midway between these two roads. So we identified that in order to what we call restore attention, we need to think about the two pitfalls we mentioned. One is failing to deliver these two targets, having a car that is safe, but also liberating the driver. And at the same time, we need to pay really care on the attention strain. Otherwise, these features will end up being not attractive to customers. And we called it a new concept, which we call serenity. That means you have the liberation of the mind, but at the same time, you can be sure the car is safe. And there are gradual ways to do that. Instead of having one route or the other route, we can measure this metric. The good part for Valeo is that this is split between two parts in the same division, which we call the brain division. One part is dealing with the driving automation, which nicely fits with AutoSense part, and the other part on the interior experience, which nicely fits with the InCabin part. And these are the two strategic pillars we are now developing in parallel. We've been as far as thinking these need to be a joint project. So we have this concept of serenity, where we say we cannot think about the car automation without considering what the cabin monitoring and the DMS is enabling. On the other hand, the interior experience will be looking much different when we get the information of what's happening outside of the car and what's the ODD of the driving automation. Meaning if the car knows how easy it is to drive in a certain zone, then in that case, we can maybe provide a little bit more liberation to the driver. This today doesn't exist really, and that's a field we think is going to be extremely important. But for that, we need a system approach, and that's what we've been doing in a project where we consider all these elements. On the left-hand side, we have the different stakeholders, which are the drivers and passengers, the vehicle, and the environment. All these are inputs to understanding what's happening outside, inside of the car, and modeling how we think the people in the car, especially the driver, are feeling. Do they feel liberated? Can they be more? Can we tune how our in-cabin systems behave depending on the situation, and then have an interaction with the customer, which will be a much better added value than just applying separately systems that will provide driving automation and at the same time in-cabin HMIs. So doing this jointly, we think, is the key in order to drive, to maneuver in the next 10, 15 years, while the level 2+ is going to be by far the biggest amount of vehicles on the market. And we need to really care on the added value, on the experience for the driver. So, in conclusion, we have been redefining slightly what's our roadmap to autonomous cars, not taking separately the aspects of automation and in-cabin experience. We think the primal promise that we all as an industry have made to our customers, it is something that will require a long ADAS transition time. I think this is now more a consensus position. And attention, as we reach a critical mass, which will be the key resource for the years to come. And we need to manage that to keep our cars appealing and the experience in the car enjoyable. The technological advances will allow to influence this attention. On the one hand, to offload the attention, to measure it, and to channel the attention. And we think it's really good news because we see a lot of potential in having ways to use attention and to channel it in a better way. But now this route needs to really care on the two pitfalls, which are, first of all, not delivering on the initial promise, having a car that is either not safe enough or not automated enough, liberating enough. This will not be allowed with a total freedom. In countries, there will be regulation to avoid that we put to less safety, for example. And we need as well to avoid the second pitfall, which is increasing enormously the driver attention strain. This might be, at the end, something in a few years where we get a feedback from OEMs or from customers saying, I'm not going to buy this car, I'm not going to buy at this OEM because the system in cabin is unmanageable. I'm offered features, I cannot use them, I have a DMS which is doing the police all the time. This will be important in the next years. And this will be solved only by a system approach. And at Valeo, the good thing is that we can mobilize several assets for that. We have our division Brain, which is a global leader in both fields, ADAS and interior experience. And by involving the technologies, regulation, all the stakeholders, customer value, we think that this should become an industry initiative, that we find new ways, maybe new standard, to judge what attention is, how to care about that, and how to deliver a better value for the customers. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Clément. Very interesting and very, very smart strategy. We have time for some questions from the audience. Please raise your hand. I think while we're waiting for the audience to think, there was a comment in a panel discussion yesterday evening, I think, about how we're kind of fighting against the grain with this attention piece, right? So in our daily lives, with social media, with our computers, there's so many demands on our attention pulling us in different directions. And as you've described, when you translate this into the vehicle, we're fighting against this societal trend as well, which adds extra pressure. So yeah, I think you make some really important points there. What are your thoughts on the kind of how those two trends kind of interact?
We think it's a big trend there is no mystery that we consider this attention topic in this presentation in the context of autonomous driving, because we feel the same not only in the car. The difference being, of course, that in a car it might have some safety consequences and less It might have health consequences outside of the car, but less immediate safety impact. Now, a big part of this is going to be in the hands of OEMs. I guess managing how enjoyable will be a ride will be very much in the brand image, in what makes a difference between an OEM to another one. And it's going to be also a differentiation between people, some who are happy to be actually overwhelmed by plenty of inputs, and some others who want to fully relax in their cars. So we have to adapt to that. But that's precisely why it's important to anticipate how to manage that with the technologies, because we cannot manage something we cannot measure. But what is good is technology is allowing us more and more to evaluate what's the attention strain and then offer the best experience depending on the customers, depending on what they like.
Yeah, absolutely. Makes sense. Questions from the audience? One down at the front here. Please, can you state your name and organization, please?
Hi, I'm Rador Gidan from Endava, UK. So I understand that drivers' well-being is reflected in their emotions. So, however, European Union has different regulations than US or China, for example. Do you think you'll build different systems or ignore some emotional hints, or how are you going to cope with the regulations in different regions?
So we think it's going to be more a parameterized system. The one that we showed in principle here, that's something that needs to be very region dependent. That's obvious. The regulatory guardrails are very different depending on countries, as well as the tastes. So we'll need to indeed have different ways of understanding the emotional cues, which is going to be extremely culture dependent. But we think there is value behind it. I think hopefully that's the message, hopefully is understandable through this presentation. There is value in providing the right technologies to understand how the experience will be the best, and that's what we all together will bring to the end customers. But if we cannot measure it, if we do not have the right understanding of how this is enjoyable in a culture or another one, this won't be possible.
Further questions? One down here.
Hi, I'm Sarah from Siemens, and we're actually working on predicting comfort for AV occupants. So I really agree with what you're doing, but I'm very curious to understand, how do you validate your digital twins, and what are the main factors that contribute to well-being in the cabin?
Yeah, so this part is a part I know a little bit less, as I am more in the driving automation part than the in-cabin part. I know we are proceeding with surveys, but we could connect separately. I don't know in very detail what we are doing. The Serenity project has been actually a quite short project. And so what we propose is now to standardize the way we would build the ground truth and evaluate these emotional aspects. But I don't have the details, so sorry for that.
Further questions? One at the back.
Yep. Konrad Sanner, Aviva Links. Very interesting talk. I have a similar question like the first one. I like the idea that the driver monitoring system is adaptive to the vehicle and the environment state. Do you think this is possible within the current framework of regulation, or is there a job to do to address this in the regulation?
Oh, it's a job to be done. We are still very much digital in the regulation, but that's exactly this kind of initiative that we want to bring to show that it's actually a gray zone we can define, we can standardize. So that's more the job we propose to do jointly with the rest of the industry.
Any more questions? Okay, I mean, I guess just a final thought from me. I think what you've outlined here aligns really well with the reason why we are here today, bringing the AutoSense and in-cabin communities together, designing ADAS that improves safety, but it has to be accepted by the users, and we have the in-cabin and external-facing systems all need to be combined in order to achieve that goal. So, yeah. It all aligns. A very poignant note from you, and thank you very much for the great keynote.
Thank you very much.